Good evening, everyone. Wow, it's great to be here. Yeah, I am pretty new to Trinity, and this will be my third year in ministry, but one of the passion areas of mine is the role of care. And I think some of the best care that you can have at a church is within the context of small groups. So I'm excited to talk about this. I want to start with a question, and this is more rhetorical. Do you have a story of your group caring for a fellow member? Can you think of a time when someone in your group was in need and your group really stepped up and cared for them, really supported them? I hope that you can. I hope you can think of a few stories, a dozen stories. Maybe you're sitting there struggling to come up with one story. Well, I want to have us actually listen to a Trinity small group member that you may recognize share about a time when he was cared for by his own small group. Let's take a look.
I ended up going to the hospital while I was going to this Bible class. And I told them I was there. And I told them, I said, guys, I'm going to take communion. So a couple of the guys told me, all right, we'll make sure that you get your communion taken care of. It took a little while, but then every one of them came to visit me in the hospital. Shocked me. I know one of the guys came at least 4 times while I was in there. Another one came a couple of times. And all the rest of them did come. And they had prayers with me, prayed and everything. And I never had anything like this in my life. And when they walked in the room, I'm so happy. Because all I was doing there is taking up space. I don't have a lot of friends. I started working young. Now I think I got more friends. And they treat me so wonderfully. I came back, I missed Bible class for a little while, and I said, something? I'm missing so much of this. I says, I don't care. I got to go back. I enjoy it so much. And all of them are so friendly. And once in a while, outside of the church, we do get together. And we went to 2 fellows' homes so far. It started out, we had a little Bible class, but then sat around and just talked and had a couple of beers, which we shouldn't be doing, but we do. You can leave that in there if you want or not. It's so enjoyable. I look forward to it. And it's not a group for old people. We have more younger people in it than we have old people in it. I consider myself an old man, but they don't consider it. They don't. They treat me like, I got a couple of them there, sometimes I think they're my fathers. They treat me so good. So, and I love them all.
Don't you love Ken? Don't you want to have a beer with Ken? Yeah. He's great. Yeah, so I think about Ken's story, and I think about this Bible verse from Galatians 6. It says, bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. I feel like that's exactly what he experienced, that all these guys in this group helped bear this burden, and they were fulfilling the law of Christ. And the law of Christ, as we know, is to love one another. And so that's why this is so important, and that's what care is all about, to fulfill the law of Christ in the ways that we love one another. So to get kind of practical, maybe a helpful way to think about care in your group, I've got 3 ways that we can think about it. And these are 3 ways that relate to crisis, or really kind of in the broad sense, those times when life is just too much. And it could be anything from having a baby, someone in your group has a baby, to you are in the hospital, maybe you lose a loved one. Whatever is going on, for those moments, how do we think about care? And I want us first to start with the kind of care that you, as maybe a leader or someone, if you're just a member of a small group, the kind of care that comes before a crisis ever takes place. Because again, sometimes we could think, well, it's only when the crisis happens that we should be thinking about this. But really, there's so much that needs to be in place so that you're actually ready to be caring for when those times may come up. And so the biggest thing to keep in mind with, missing a slide. The biggest thing to keep in mind with care before a crisis is to make needs normal. Now, you've got a handout in your folder if you haven't seen it, and I'm a terrible teacher because I put all the answers on the handout already. So you don't have to write anything down. But the phrase, really, the thing to remember with this is to make needs normal. So thinking about your own group, do people share what's going on in their life? Do people see your group as a source of support? Or do things pretty much stay surface level? Do people never really lean on each other? And so if that is the case, if people don't really share their needs and share what's going on, then here's where you can help lead your group in this by making needs normal. There's really two ways that you can do this, and they both involve modeling what you want to see. To model the transparency so that you can encourage transparency. And so when it comes time to share what's going on, be vulnerable, be honest. When you're talking about prayers, don't just be the one who's hearing prayer requests, share requests and lean on your group and model and encourage transparency that way. But another really important way to lead your group in these times and kind of the normal times is to model how to respond and support needs. And Nick mentioned it just a little bit ago about advice and how tempting it is to want to give advice when someone shares something. When we get into the series, the Forgiving Challenge, one of the kind of ground rules that is laid out is that you will not be giving unsolicited advice. So that's something you're going to be agreeing to, and I know I could be guilty of this myself, but there really is a difference between support and advice. And sometimes it could be really well-intended when we're giving advice, but what someone may need is just for you to listen and to be there. And that's all you have to do, and to not feel like you need to fix it or totally try to solve whatever problem is going on. So to respond in a way that is appropriate is a great way, again, for you to lead your group in these times with the little things. Because ultimately, if you are faithful in handling the little things, so to speak, then when the big things come in your group, then it will be all the easier to know what to do and how to respond and how to care for your group. So I want you to think about how you can be caring for your group before anything ever happens. But then, of course, all right, so when the crisis does come, this would be the second time to be thinking about care in your group. So when someone may be in the hospital like Ken was, someone has a big life change, something tragic, they lose a job or they do lose a loved one, what is your role, especially as a small group leader, in caring for that person, for that member of your group? Well, I've got a little phrase here, and of course it rhymes, because everything that's true rhymes, right? Communicate, delegate, and don't overcomplicate. Okay, when it comes to these crisis moments, here's just 3 words that you can keep in mind, is to communicate, delegate, don't overcomplicate. And to help illustrate this, because it's fairly self-explanatory, but to help illustrate, share a time when I was a part of a group where I thought this was done pretty well. So a few years ago, was in a small group, and there's a young couple that was a part of our group, and they just had a baby, a little girl, and everything was pretty good, but a couple months in, their baby started to have these seizures that were unexplained, and it was kind of turning into a really scary situation. So they ended up needing to be in the hospital almost 24/7. So they had their little girl who was being monitored constantly, and they had to be there to be available for the doctors. But they are homeowners with a young dog at home, and it's like they've got all these things going on. So get a call, and they're telling me, they called me, saying, hey, this is going on, and we're just really struggling. And so get to talk a little bit. But I said, hey, thank you for sharing. I'm so sorry to hear this. Can I let the group know that this is going on? And so get to our group chat, which was always active, that we always made use of, and let the group know. And pretty soon, we're firing on all cylinders, thinking, okay, how can we really come and support this young couple? And having known them already, we know that they have some pretty serious food allergies, so we're thinking, okay, well, they got to be in the hospital 24/7. They probably Can they eat the food of the hospital? Okay, let me take care of that. Let me see if I can just bring them some food. I know what they need. They've got this dog at home, this new puppy that needs to be let out a lot and walked and fed and everything. So we got to take care of that. And so by the time we were done, Mary, my wife, had brought them a meal in the hospital. I went to their house and walked their dog and fed their dog and did all of that. A couple people called them, a couple people visited them, and by the time that whole episode was done, our entire group just all took a share of the care. And this was a group where I was a leader and the pastor, but I loved that I did not have to try to do everything on my own. That really everyone had a part to play, and that's what delegating care is all about. And especially for you as a leader, that a great way to be leading your group in caring is by letting them take a share, seeing what they could do to be helping out. And finally, I was so thankful that we did not make it way too complicated. The person who was going to be thinking through food initially, they're like, well, should we call the hospital and should we look at all the menus that they've got to see if they've got the gluten-free and all the other allergens? They're like, you know what? Let me just make a meal and bring it over, and that'll be just fine. So again, just to not make things too complicated, and really just to start with the simplest thing. And some of this then ties in with the other important aspect of the care that you can provide during a crisis, and it has to do with prayer. Now, there are really two kinds of prayer that I want you to think about. There's praying for that person and praying with that person. And I mention both of these because so often I think we maybe naturally default to praying for someone. And what that can amount to is sending a text, say, hey, I'm praying for you. Or, hey, I'm praying for you. Let me know if there's anything I can do. And that's good. And you know what's really good, though, is when you do actually pray. And when you don't just tell someone, hey, I'm praying for you, and you never pray for them. So if you say that, I'm going to lay this on your conscience. Try to pray for them, okay? But then you can take things a step further and say, okay, let me just actually pray with this person. And that can be something as simple as sending a prayer over text. And it's something that they can read. Or trying to call them. And you might think, well, I don't want to bother them or whatever's going on. They'll let it go to voicemail. And then you can leave the prayer over the voicemail. I have people do that for me, and it's so encouraging, and it still counts. It still counts. So again, finding a way to not only just pray for people, to pray with them, is kind of that next level of, again, showing them that you're there for them, and they're not going through this alone. So just some easy ways to think about how to be praying for and caring for someone during a crisis. And finally, thinking about care after crisis. I've walked with a lot of families who have lost loved ones, and the grieving that they've experienced. Already done, I think, about 50 funerals just in my 3 years of ministry. And that's a lot of grief. And one of the things that I've seen, and maybe you've seen this, especially if you've experienced this personally, is that while it is difficult during the funeral and kind of immediately after someone passes, it's also really difficult 2 months later when everyone else has gone on with their life and you're still left dealing with the reality. It seems like everyone else forgot, but day in, day out, you're dealing with this reality. And that's just one example, but really with whatever crisis may have gone on, for you as a leader to set a reminder for yourself. I know I need reminders, or else I forget everything. To set a reminder for yourself, say, hey, 2 weeks from now, I'm going to text this person on Tuesday and just say, hey, I know this happened a little bit ago. How are you doing? Just the random check-in can be so powerful. And it helps them see, wow, I just thought everyone kind of forgot and moved on, and I honestly didn't want to burden anyone else anymore, but thank you for reaching out and telling me. So the random check-in, the check-in after the dust settles, can be such an easy but powerful way for you to, again, show that group member that they are not alone. So I've run through those, but again, all the answers are on your handout. But I want you to take a little bit of time, whether it be during the break that we've got right now, or whether it be on your own, and to think about these 3 opportunities for care with your own group, and then see where some extra attention should be given. But with all that, Thanks so much.
Thank you.